Well, welcome everybody to another series of AHA webinars. Today we're talking about how to turn a tidal wave of online qual data into amazing insights. And we have two presenters today. Ray Fischer is the CEO and founder of AHA, the strategic online qual platform. And joining him is Jim White, a founding partner at RealityCheck Consulting, research partner for many Fortune 500 brands. Today, both of these guys have been involved in online qual for over 13, 15 years. So hopefully there's a lot of insights they can offer you. I want to talk about a couple things. It's about a 45-minute presentation with 15 minutes of Q&A. And if you have questions, you should be able to see on your control panel a question tab. Open it up and fire away. So without further ado, here's Ray Fischer and Jim White.
Hey, thank you, everybody. This is Ray. I'll just do a quick intro on me, and I'll turn it over to Jim. I am a Detroit native, and AHA is headquartered here in Detroit. My background, just so you understand where I kind of come from an insight standpoint, I was a Pepsi brand manager in the 80s and 90s, and that's where I got my first exposure to market research. And I had a little bit of a tech immersion from 98 to 02. During the dot-com boom and then bust, and then became an insights consultant in 02, where I moderated focus groups up till about 2012, and then the technology that we're going to show you or share with you today kind of took over my life. I did my first online qual study in 2005, 13 years ago. We developed our first platform, which then became AHA. We started that in 2007, originally called Living Diary, morphed into AHA in 2012. And since then, I've been involved in thousands of online studies. So hopefully I can share that great experience with you today. Jim?
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Ray. I'm born and bred in Kentucky and still live here, actually. And just for those that care, I'm a University of Kentucky guy, and Ray Fisher's a Michigan State guy. So I'm sure, Ray, you've got your bracket filled out, right?
We do. And we probably have people watching dual screens today with a little NCAA tournament on the side.
Right. I got my start in the world of journalism and then migrated into the world of ad agencies after doing a graduate school in communication studies, and have been doing online qual for quite a while, over 10 years. And for me, it's another of kind of a broad qualitative methodological tool belt. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is where online qual fits analytically in a spectrum of qualitative data analysis to quantitative data analysis. And long story short, we're going to be talking about how online qual is really its own animal and has to be treated that way. So back over to you, Ray, if you want to kick this thing off. That'd be great.
All right, just a quick AHA commercial. We're not here to necessarily sell our companies to you guys. We're going to talk more about high-level thoughts and how to do online qual, but just a quick one on who AHA is. We are an asynchronous strategic online qual platform. We are activity-based, so we've got qual primarily. We do have a few quant tools, and we really specialize in what we call projective and social activities, which I'll kind of brief you on a little bit later. We do B2C and B2B stuff, of course. We are international, and basically we're all language compatible, and we've worked in about 25 countries thus far. And the services we offer, we obviously have the platform and the technology. We do the programming for you, so you don't have to worry about learning how to do that. We will project manage to make sure the studies come out as good as they possibly can. We can recruit for you depending on what market and what target it is. And again, if we need to do consulting, we can handle some of that. And if it's heavier duty stuff, we usually team up with Jim's RealityCheck company. Now over to Jim.
Yeah, so RealityCheck has been around since 1996, and we're an insights-based consulting company, and we have qualitative consultants around the world. We like to say we're in the human insights business, not the consumer insights business, because what interests us really is understanding human beings, people, rather than just the small sliver of a person that shops and buys and consumes. We have full service capabilities, field all the way through analysis and reporting. And we engage in both the digital and face-to-face world. So we use the tool that's best for the job, and have sort of been along for the digital qualitative ride since its inception, really, and have watched it grow and develop as a field, which has been fascinating. So that is who we are at RealityCheck.
All right. And just a side note to that too, you guys, Jim and I have actually collaborated on probably 350 to 400 studies over the last 13 years. So we certainly know the best practice stuff. And again, what we're going to do today is share that with you.
Seems like more than that, Ray.
More years or more studies?
Well, both.
Absolutely. So while we're here, we're going to share what we know. We want this to be kind of a good learning thing. Hopefully it's entertaining for you as well as educational. There's going to be broken into two parts, really. The first part is going to be me, and I'm going to talk about designing effective online qual studies, how to put them together, how to run them right, how to make sure you get the results, the data you're looking for. And then secondarily, on the second half of this, Jim is going to then take you through how to manage that data. And we call it a tidal wave, and we don't want to scare you with the tidal wave. These two visuals kind of, are what we really want you to take away. One is it could be a large amount of water coming at you, but we want to see you riding that or hanging 10 on that big wave. Okay, so that's what we want to do with you today. So there really are 5 key takeaways that we want to cover. So one, designing studies. Again, with the report in mind, you're going to hear that a lot today. We want to create activities and share those with you that connect on a more deeper human level. Okay. And what we'll go through is some innovative approaches for analyzing data more efficiently. And Jim's going to show you some real, good examples of looking at different types of data, and then how to convert that analysis into concise and supportable strategies that your clients are going to buy. So net, you're going to have a roadmap for getting the most out of your data, clearly how to get there and then what to do with it once you've, rode the wave. Okay. So with that, we're going to go over study design, analysis, and then delivering great insights. So some facts real quickly on online qual. The unstructured data can pile up quickly, so you want to be careful how you do that. The study design piece is super important. You want to make sure when you write your report and when you put it together that you stay on task. The clear thing you don't want to do is end up in a committee situation where people think it's a free-for-all and they can throw in every kind of question you possibly would want. And what you learn here, and what we've learned over the last 13 years, is really less is often more. You want to definitely avoid redundancy. So make sure you're not asking questions the same way, with just different words, because respondents pick up on that. It's annoying to you when you do your analysis and they get a little bit bummed out that they're explaining the same things over and over. Key thing I'm going to show you too when I do a little study design walkthrough is mixing up activities is fun for everyone. Okay. It can be fun for you as the researcher, or if you're a client, it can be great to see different things. A series of open ends is very boring. And then projective techniques, with video and pictures also, kind of interspersed, spices things up, and it really helps you connect with your respondents and really immerse yourself in a digital ethno kind of way with their lives. Okay. So study design, just to kind of back up and give you a couple of options here. The base study design, the one I see the most, has 40 respondents. It usually lasts about 4 days. You expect generally 30 to maybe 45 minutes a day per respondent. And then the other thing is the incentive. That usually is tied into what the workload is. And, for a 4-day study, expecting 30 minutes a day, $125 is a pretty solid incentive. Key thing there is, again, it's almost like $1 per minute. So if you look at that, you got 120 minutes, you give them $125, rounded up $5. The other way to look at this too, on the B2B side, you're definitely going to have higher incentives. So if it is, CEOs or something, you could be paying them as much as $500 to do 3 activities that might take them 60 minutes total time. So again, you want to match things up, incentive to, to level of responsibility, lifestyle, et cetera, job role, et cetera. Okay. Now this is kind of the base, what I'll call the mean study size, but the studies can be designed in many, many ways. So here's a couple of quick examples. They can go as long or as short as you want. A very frequent execution is homework. That might be all the people you're going to take into focus groups. You may have 50 to 60 respondents. They may come in for a half an hour or so. And things that they might do might be just a collage. They might do a storytelling exercise. They might do something social where they collaborate with people and talk about some different ideas or thoughts, or consumer behavior opportunities. The other thing is you could involve a store trip too. So sometimes there is a little bit of a homework, kind of a road trip part of it. And the incentive for those kinds of things can range from the homework side from $25 to $50, 25 for just maybe the activity level stuff. If you got them on a store trip, you're generally going to give them a little bit more. So that may range up towards $50. Okay. So again, I mentioned the popular size. The most popular is really like the 4-day study. It could be 3, 4, 5 days, but 4 days seems to be the mean. Usually, again, 32 to 48 respondents is kind of the big range. And anything goes in those studies. You can have them do anything. And again, the incentives can be driven by that kind of minute per expected engagement. And then again, layer it up a little bit higher if it's going to be a store trip included in that or any kind of remote diaries. Okay. And then often on a 7-day study, that comes up quite a bit. And again, you could go as long as a couple of years if you want. But 7-day studies are more of a deep dive, usually include a diary. So maybe there's a home use test involved in that as well. And again, all the tactics you use can really be mixed and matched, and you can really do anything with them. Again, expecting about 30 to 45 minutes a day. Incentive there might be 200 to 250 over that time period. And again, anything you do on the B2B side is going to be extensively more, both from a recruiting cost standpoint and the incentive as well. Okay, so we're going to talk study design. The one-on-one of that is clear objectives. Again, don't make it a free-for-all. You really want to be tight on what you're trying to do. Don't try to get more done than what you're attempting to do in the objectives of your research project. The recruiting part, pick a great recruiter. As I've mentioned before, we can recruit for you, but you want somebody who's going to stay engaged in the process from the time the study starts till the incentives are paid out. Participation is key, and there are tricks. I'm going to share a couple of those with you to keeping people engaged in studies over several days, and we'll go through that in a little bit of detail. Creativity is a big deal. You want to mix things up, make it different. Every day, one of the really cool things about online is, again, if you think of surveys, it's usually just a ton of closed-ended questions, and people kind of blow through them. In these online qual studies, you have the opportunity to do different kinds of activities each day, and I'll kind of touch on those in a minute. And again, you're going to hear this consistently from me and from Jim as designed with the report in mind. So think of the things that you're going to want from a stimulus standpoint and from a finding standpoint that are going to make your story at the end of the day sing. Okay, so mix it up. This is a common way to do things in a 4-day study. That first day, typically you'll launch a getting to know you activity where you get to understand who they are and set context. Day 2, for example, again, you can do tons of different things, but you might want to understand a buyer journey or maybe some consumer behavior activities, related to making decisions on which products, goods, or services to buy. The third day might be all about maybe competitive stuff where you do some brand mapping, perceptual mapping, and a few other things, maybe some social activities. And then that fourth day is often used, for other things or to get some ideas across. So it's a good day to do a little concept testing. Maybe you've got 3 positioning statements you want to share. You launch those on day 4, have people go through those, do a little qual feedback on it, maybe pop in a quant question here just to kind of, again, frame things up a little bit for some of your data sorting at the end, and get some ideas and maybe a wrap-up activity that compares all the ideas and sees which one you like best, and you tell the moderator why. So that's a kind of basic, or I'd say a basic 4-day run. So one of the things that's super important to the whole process is getting a human touch established. On day 1, it's great to have the moderator do a little intro. So if you're a moderator or if you're employing a moderator, it's great to have them put a little video together. It could be 1 or 2 minutes, and it really is a getting to know them. Who are they? What are they all about? What's their job? What's the role of their job in this particular study? And what are the expectations of respondents in this study? So what you'll do there is you get this nice little interplay there. And a lot of times the first thing that the respondent's going to do is then turn the video camera on themselves, asynchronously, of course, at their own time on their schedule. They flip on their webcam, and they may give you the same kind of feedback back. What's the life all about? What's their challenges? Maybe talk about the category a little bit. And then again, 60 to 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes max, and you get a real nice getting to know you context setter. Okay. Another cool thing is, daily morning notes, where the moderator basically sends something out each morning, or the project manager that says, hey, here's what we're doing today. So I kind of call it the housekeeping and cheerleading note, where you kind of, hey, if anybody's falling behind, give them a little encouragement to catch up. And then the other thing about it is, lay out what they're going to be doing that day, so they just at least have a high level understanding of what they're engaging in for that particular day's activity. Okay. Making them feel welcome at the beginning is great. And then again, one of the really cool things that I think is great, there are moderator probing capabilities on most platforms. It's really nice in day 1 to have your moderator actually send a note, Maybe they put up a family picture and you say something like, hey, great looking family, looking forward to your responses. Thanks for joining us. Really is going to be fun over the next 4 days. So a little bit of a human connection there goes a long way. Using these kinds of tactics with good recruiting and recruiter involvement and the right incentive is going to drive participation rates somewhere between 90 and 100%. Okay, so that should be your expectation going into online qual. I definitely remember 10 years ago getting 50% seemed okay, but the best practice approaches to this has really come a long way. So when respondents log in, they're going to see a roadmap. Here's what they're going to do. Here's their schedule, stuff they're going to have to accomplish, the times and days that things start, and then when they end. So they have the roadmap. So I want to dive into these activities. So let's say I'm getting to know you day one. While you may have specific, obviously category things you're trying to figure out and chase down, but it's really nice to step back for a minute and get to know these people. Okay, helps you when you might create some personas at the end of the study when you write your report. But if you can understand their life philosophies, hobbies and interests, it may not seem like it has anything to do with the category, but at the same time, it does set context, gets them comfortable, gives them some softballs to kind of warm them up and get them into the study and engage with you on a personal level. So they might tell you about their family, they'll put up pics and video. And this is a great chance too to, let's say it's a food study or you're doing something on cleaning products, laundry cleaning products. Great opportunity to have them do a little video tour for you. So they might do a video introduction via webcam and then take you around the house, wherever you want to go with their smartphone, beam things straight up to a platform, have them take you to the fridge, the laundry room, the medicine cabinet, whatever it is you're trying to explore, and really get that digital ethno as if you were actually there. Okay. So that's a good day one. The kind of things I just talked about there, roughly would take them about 30 minutes to accomplish. Okay. Now, day two, you might dive in a little bit deeper and try to understand, consumer behavior, decision-making processes, buyer journeys, et cetera. There's a couple ways to do that. A lot of times in day two, we might pop in a collage, and that may get around the emotional context of the category, maybe the decision-making process of, buying, or maybe it's something like, feeding snacks to your kids. How do moms feel, after they fed a particular snack to their kid? They might pick some symbolic images, put those on a collage and drop in little words or phrases that describe the emotion associated with each of those images and give you a collage. And Jim will talk a little bit about how we actually analyze this data a little bit quicker and easier than it might look. Okay. Then the other thing you might do as a part B of this particular day two activities, you might have a buyer journey. So you may have like a roadmap of all the key decision points that somebody might make on the way to buying a product. And on these left and right sides of these particular boxes, actually layer in what it is that happens at each step of the way. Okay. So again, you can get quite a bit done in these particular ways. And then here's another option. Let's say if you did either do this or maybe add it to your day two activities, is storytelling. This is a great projective technique. We have a tool here that has a piece of loose leaf paper and a nice set of guidelines down the left side that describes what we want respondents to do when they do engage in a storytelling, whether it's fictional or literal. The whole thing here is you want to drive creativity. And the key thing you want to do too is you want to really specifically tease out what it is you want respondents to do over the course of that study, of the story. What do you want them to address? What do you want them to expound upon? What do you want them to share with you? So the better you can describe the things they need to include, the deeper and richer that story is going to be. Okay. Day three, again, you could do a little bit of, grouping and sorting, maybe trying to understand brand personality with some graphic images. Over here, we've got a perceptual brand map. And again, Jim will talk a little bit more about this a little later, but we've got a tool here, and a lot of people do, that's just a typical X and Y axes with continuum points where, brands or attributes can be dropped onto a canvas and, really reflect on where people would put these particular brands, but more importantly, why and how they feel about those brands relative to the grid. And then maybe on day three as a part B, you may throw in a social activity, a little group discussion. We've got a couple tools here. One is very much like Pinterest, where they can upload pictures and talk about whatever that picture means to them. And then they can like and comment accordingly on the other respondents' submissions. And we've got something else that we call a wishing wall, which is a social media tool that's really sentence completion wrapped in a social media environment, where again, they might finish sentences, great for ideation. So it might be something about the ideal product they might envision. They might describe that, post it, and then have other respondents like and comment accordingly. So that's day 3. And day 4 is usually a wrap-up day. And again, that day 3 social stuff, usually you'll run that for a couple days. So it would run, let's say day 2, day 3, day 4. So people come back in and rejoin conversations, expound a little bit more on others' ideas. And then, day 4 might be something like going ahead and actually having people, review concepts. As I mentioned before, you may have 3 or 4 concepts. Maybe it's mood boards, could be ads, could be positioning statements, etc. So they can review those. Those can be concept rotated as well. You can mix some open end and closed ends on that. And then again, you can get some feedback on a lot of different stimulus you may want to share. So you get a little bit more of a bonus out of your study. Okay, so that is the 4-day roadmap. And then the final thoughts on this is, when you do put your guide together, you want to keep it focused and creative. You want to use your imagination, and you want to definitely create that human connection with respondents. And most importantly, have fun with whatever it is you are creating, because the possibilities are endless. If you want to try something a little unusual or different, hey, go for it. You absolutely should. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to turn it over to Jim. And what he's going to do is after you've seen that 4-day kind of run, Jim's going to show you what you'll do with that data after you've created this, what we're calling modestly a tidal wave of information. Okay. With that, Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Pass the baton. Give me one second.
As you guys can gather, online qual is a really flexible set of methodologies or approaches that I wish we could do more of it, actually. I think oftentimes it puts respondents in a much more comfortable environment in which to share and express themselves. And what you could probably also gather from Ray's and let's see, Ray, am I controlling this now?
You know what, Jim? I don't know if you can. I'm trying to find it, and it gives me all the people that are. Oh, I found you. Hang on a second. There we go. There we go.
Over there.
Technical. Yeah, there you go. You should have it now.
Got it. Okay.
Accept it, and you're good to go.
Yeah. So, but the issue that I think a lot of qualitative researchers find and clients find with online qual is it does produce quite a bit of unstructured data. So, unlike quantitative analysis, where you've got quantifiable data that can easily be analyzed through various software packages, online qual isn't quite there yet. And I think a lot of people approach online qualitative analysis the same way that they approach the analysis of face-to-face qualitative. And the main point that I want you to understand from today's presentation, if you take nothing else away, remember this. If you're approaching the analysis of online qualitative data the same way you're approaching the analysis of face-to-face qualitative data, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. It's a different method, it's a different approach, and it requires a different analytical approach. I think of it this way. Face-to-face, in my mind, is a conversation. If you're doing a focus group or a live in-person interview, you're having a conversation with a group of people. It happens in a linear fashion. There's back and forth that's occurring in sort of a much more fluid real time than anything you can achieve online. And you're analyzing also in the moment. If you're moderating a focus group, you are analyzing as the group is unfolding. If you're conducting an interview, you're doing the same thing. You're applying analytical approaches that are right for conversational data. Online is not a conversation in that sense. It is in a very small way, but we're collecting so much more data online, video, imagery, lengthy narrative text like stories that Ray was showing you. And then, of course, you do have bulletin board style back and forth, but there's a richness of data that comes through in online that far surpasses anything you're going to collect in the conversational analysis of face-to-face qualitative. It requires a different approach. I think of it as the analysis of texts. And by texts, I mean that in the broad anthropological sense. So an anthropologist would think of a text as an oral transcript as a written document, like a story that somebody has written, but it's also iconic. It's symbolism, like the kind of text that a semiologist would study, imagery, brands, and then finally, audiovisual. We have people uploading videos and expressing themselves through video. So you've got all these different kinds of data coming through online qualitative, and they need to be treated in a different way than face-to-face. The other key difference here, and I teased to this just a minute ago, I think of face-to-face qualitative like a journey through the data. If you're the researcher or you're observing a series of interviews or focus groups, the data are coming at you in a nice sort of linear way. You do one interview and then you do the next one and the next one. You do one focus group and that's followed by the next one. You can process that and manage it in real time much more easily than you can with online qual. Online qualitative data is much more like a tidal wave. If you've got 40 or 60 respondents all participating in an activity-based online qualitative study, you know, on day one, you've got 40 to 60 submissions of unstructured data all coming in at one time. You can't simply process all of that in the same linear way that you would do with face-to-face. And what I like the way to make this tangible is I think a lot of qualitative researchers approach the analysis of online qualitative you know, by when that study is done, they start printing out transcripts of what happened, respondent by respondent, and sitting there with a highlighter going through the data. You know who you are if you're doing that. And if you're doing that, please stop. It's the most inefficient way to go about analyzing online qualitative data. On the one hand, it's inefficient. And secondly, you're going to miss important things. You're going to miss important things. You're not analyzing the data with rigor and with structure. Typically in qualitative analysis, we, in the face-to-face world, we're analyzing the flow of the study, or the analysis fits into the flow of the study like this. We design the study. We're kind of doing field work and analysis at the same time. I know I do this. If I'm moderating a group, I am processing themes as I hear them, as I go through that linear journey of data collection. So I'm moderating the groups or conducting the interviews, but at the same time, I'm doing analysis, and then I kind of jump right to reporting. The first thing I would like to suggest in the world of online qualitative is that we need to maybe steal a page from our quantitative brothers and sisters out there and begin to actually build in an analysis phase. But also, the flow of the project changes because it's really critical. I think it's critical in any form of marketing research, but it's really critical in online qual analysis, as it is with quantitative analysis, to design your study thinking about the analytical approach and the reporting approach that you're going to be working toward. So it is this kind of circular process. Sure, study design leads into field work, and then we're wrangling data and analyzing it. But you've got to be thinking about, how am I going to analyze and report all of this unstructured data on the back end? So for instance, if you are, again, doing an online qualitative study and you've got 40 to 60 respondents all uploading videos of some brand experience, you better be thinking about, on the front end, how you're going to analyze that on the back end. Don't wait until all those videos come in and sit there and think, now what am I going to do with these? You better have an analytical framework to begin with, and that's going to sharpen the questions that you ask, the tasks that you have them do, and it's going to make the analytical back end much more efficient. I talk about data wrangling here because I feel like with unstructured qualitative data, that's pretty important. Getting the data into a form in which you can analyze it. In the quantitative world, this step would be where you're doing, data scrubbing and coding, cleaning up the data to prepare for analysis. It's similar here. In my approach, when I'm dealing with online qualitative data. At this point, I'm categorizing, I'm grouping, and I'm setting up the data for that deep analytical process. But I've thought about the structure of that ahead of time. So it really does become this sort of circular process. As Ray was saying earlier, you got to begin with the end in mind, and it's particularly important with online qual. So a couple of keys here that we're going to talk about. Start with the end in mind. And part of that process, that analytical framework that you want to start with, is building in or creating variance. Just like in the world of quantitative research, I think it's critical in online qual. It's going to help your analysis if you think through where variance is going to come from. And what do I mean by variance? Well, basically, it's setting up groups to compare. Am I going to compare users to non-users, those aware of the advertising to those who are not aware of the advertising? Am I going to compare respondent experiences from point A to point B? But setting up that structure of variance on the front end is one way to help you organize and wrangle that data on the back end. Now you're creating a framework for analysis when you're designing the study. Rather than waiting for all that data to come in and then think about how you're going to analyze it on the back end. So once you think about where your variance is going to come from, then it's critical to develop what I call keyhole tasks. So if you think about all of the different approaches and tools that Ray talked about in the first part of this analysis, all those different things, collages, storytelling, diaries, perceptual maps, you want to identify one or two tasks or measures that are going to unlock the analytical plan of your study. Keyhole tasks is what I call them because of that metaphor. But those are the tasks or the questions that you know when the study is over, you are going to go there first. That is going to be the question in your study that's going to help you understand differences in those variance groups that you've set up. A lot of times the keyhole tasks that I prefer are somehow quantifiable. They may be a rating scale on an experience, and I'll give you a couple of examples of those. They may be something like a story, but but I know how I'm going to analyze that story and what key themes I'm going to look for so that I can efficiently use that story to analyze variance across different groups in the study. So we'll share a couple of examples of keyhole tasks. And again, you don't want too many of those. You want one or two, but they're going to allow you to quickly and efficiently wrangle the data, organize it in a way that's meaningful and tied to the study objectives. And then you've got your supporting tasks, the other tasks that are going to provide the richness and the depth and the qualitative life to really bring your study to life and make it interesting and support those keyhole task insights. So let's talk about kind of each of these areas with some examples. The two critical pieces here, I think, are creating variance on the front end and then understanding what your keyhole tasks are going to be that fits with that variance plan. And just as I said earlier, when I think about creating variance in a study, I'm really thinking about it on maybe 2 or 3 levels. One is segments. So, and that could be any group of consumers. If I got 40 people in a study, I want to make sure that I'm building in some sense of variance on the front end. So I know going into the study, I'm going to compare this group to that group. And again, maybe it's an attitudinal segmentation study that's been done. And I know I want to look at these 3 different segments. Maybe the segments are defined by user groups or brand loyalty or whatever. But you're setting up a context for comparative analysis. The best research is always variable analytic. And I know that sounds awfully quantitative, and it is, but it applies to qualitative as well. And it particularly applies here because it can really make your analytical job easier, especially if you know what those groups are ahead of time. The other way to create variance is across time. So a time series analysis, but you might be looking at different experiences of respondents from point A to point B. How were they before they had an experience or after? How do they compare at 2 points in time? So you can imagine, as Ray talked about, doing a collage activity. Well, you may know, I want to have them do a collage to express emotion before they have an experience, and I want to have them do it after they have an experience. So you know, going in, you've set up a comparative framework that's rooted in time to do that analysis. And then you can also create variance around things like emotion. People that had a positive reaction to something versus a negative reaction. So you might build in a measure of emotion, and maybe that's a slider scale or something like that to measure intensity of emotion. But you know, going in, when the data come back, I'm going to separate my respondents based on their emotional response, and I'm going to compare those groups and analyze it that way. So once you create that variance on the front end, and you know what your comparative framework is, what are you going to compare them on that is going to allow you to quickly and efficiently get into the data? Well, those are your keyhole tasks. So certainly you want your keyhole task to be something that's meaningful to the primary objectives of the study. It's got to be measuring something relevant. Secondly, it should be simple. It should be easy and quick to analyze, and it should be efficient to do so. So again, I really like to set up closed-ended quantitative measures to be my keyhole task. People have different preferences here, but I find those the best way to get into a study. So for instance, as I've been saying, you know, if I've got a study that has a daily diary, imagine again, you've got 40 some odd respondents, each doing a daily diary. Maybe that diary is 8 or 10 questions. That's a lot of unstructured data, but I may put one measure in that diary that simply is a slider scale that says, rate your emotion on this day. Well, I know that I can quickly go to that and identify the emotional peaks and valleys in the data, and I can start my analysis by focusing just on those moments. That's a way to use both emotion and a closed-ended question as a keyhole task to give you an efficient way to wrangle the data and set up that comparative analysis. So let me give you a few examples of this. Here's that emotion meter, which this was a study with new pet owners actually a few years ago. So these are people that had recently adopted a new puppy or kitten, and we were tracking their behavior and their experiences through the first couple of weeks of life with a new puppy or kitten in the house. If anybody has lived through that, you know it can be an emotionally trying time. But we also wanted to measure how they felt about how knowledgeable they were on each given day. So this was a rating scale that we had embedded into a diary. We asked them to fill out a daily diary on the experience of life with their new pet. And we had them rate at the end of that diary their positive or negative emotion. And we also had them rate their perceptions of how knowledgeable they were. There are some days with a new pet where you really feel like you know what you're doing. There are other days where you really feel like you're back on your heels and you don't have a clue. And what we were able to do was quantify the responses, as you can see here, but it also allowed us to get very quickly into the emotional peaks and valleys. So we used the meters as keyhole tasks to get us to supporting tasks that really brought the data to life. This is one respondent's emotional journey. And you can see the low point was when the cat peed on the mattress, and then it got better over time. Similar here with dog owners, you know, low points. I was depressed, I was irritating, came back in the house to, you know, after a half hour of outside running time, and you can see basically those emotional low points. But what this allowed us to do was to quickly flag and identify those high and low emotion moments so we could get right to it and also get a sense of the patterns of emotional journeys that emerge from respondents. We did it this way instead of, imagine, if you will, printing out 40 respondents completing daily diaries and reading those one at a time. This allowed us to quickly get to the most illuminating moments for the client without having to go through everything, because we knew our analytical framework on the front end, and we included a measure specifically to help us find that, a keyhole task to help us get to that on the back end. We'll also use composites in this sense. So using closed-ended measures is one thing, using composites are another. So one of the tricks that we can do is obviously a projective technique where you're having people express emotion through imagery. We'll have them create a digital collage. Again, it can be very daunting if you have to analyze 40 to 60 collages, or let's say you have people do multiple collages. Now you're looking at 80 some odd pieces of unstructured qualitative data. Well, how do you analyze that in a rigorous way, so you're sure not to be missing anything, but also an efficient way? Well, if you're using images that are preloaded into a digital library, you can code them numerically and have the software generate a composite collage for you. So you can quickly see which of the images that are being used most frequently. Then you can go in, that is your keyhole task. Then you can go into the supporting data and say, okay, let's see what people are saying and how they're, what emotions they're using that image to express. So here is a composite collage from a study that was done. I can't remember the topic here. Oh, this is shopping for health insurance. And we used that to see the images that most of the people were uploading that were used most frequently. And then for that qualitative richness, we went in and said, okay, what are they saying about those images? What do they represent? And we built this image and dropped it into the analysis. The keyhole task was the numerical sorting of the imagery, but then we added through supporting tasks that qualitative richness to bring it to life. You can also use composites, as Ray mentioned, perceptual mapping. And again, you can jump right to perceptual mapping. We had them do in this study, the brand party activity, where we had respondents grouping brands by logo, like with like. And but you know, the challenge of analyzing a large number of these by sight is really daunting. But what you can do is use the software to identify clusters of brands. And what we were able to do is use this to identify the brands that our client's brand was most frequently associated with. So again, out of a large number of collages, we ran an analysis to get to a composite perceptual map that showed us very clearly the brands that our client's brand was typically associated with. And then we were able to subdivide that by variance, a positive affinity group of respondents and a neutral affinity group of respondents. So tools like that just really make this easy to build in those kind of keyhole measures and do this kind of analysis very efficiently. But you got to think about it on the front end and build in the measures into your study so you can do it on the back end. I don't know, Ray, do you have anything to add to that? I know that there are some tools here that make that even easier.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, the key thing there, everybody, is that, again, as Jim mentioned on the collage piece, we can quantify the images that were selected. And as you mentioned, the tags, it's great to have a little descriptor on that tag, so you maybe don't even have to look up the image, so you know what it is. On the perceptual maps, like you see right here, the beautiful thing is it will give you by total and by segment the average placement positioning in a visual way. So it'll be a map for all respondents and then a map for segment 1, 2, and 3, et cetera. So really simple and easy to kind of create these aggregate, summary things that really cut through your analysis quickly. And then again, remember, the key thing is going to be the whys. It's going to be the open-ends that follow these, collage and mapping exercises.
Yeah, yeah. The interesting thing about this study also was the brands that our client's brand was not associated with, and that was important as well. And that did vary across the different consumer segments that we had set up. So we saw some changes there. But clearly, I'm not going to reveal who the brand was, but it was typically associated with those older kind of legacy brands and brands that were more premium and cutting edge. It was typically not associated with very frequently, but I'm not sure we would have known that if we were just eyeballing a large number of collages that we had printed out or perceptual maps and trying to analyze the data that way. Through the use of composites, we were able to see that pattern very clearly and then bring it to life with some examples. The final thing I'd like to point out is just coding. I don't do this in any rigorous way, but I will sometimes include keyhole measures that I know I am going to roughly code or categorize. And you frame those questions in order to produce, sortable or codable responses. So you want, you're not doing this with storytelling. You're doing this with maybe a 1 sentence or 2 sentence response. But you're categorizing each of the respondent entries into data. This is an example from a study about hospital selection, how people go about the process of choosing hospitals. And we had a measure in there to ask them to describe their criteria. Well, we knew on the front end that we were going to go in and roughly code those into categories. We weren't as rigorous as creating intercoder reliability and a rigorous code book, but we did take a few passes through the data and create some codes, and there were clearly some patterns. And then we were able to sort, and we did all of this in Excel by exporting the transcripts into Excel. Then we were able to sort those by those categories, creating basically a new variance, and look at, again, creating variance here, acute versus chronic care cases. Look at how those drivers of choice differed for different respondents. That was our keyhole measure. And then what we did is bring to life, let me skip past this, Ray, and go to this slide. Then what we did is build in that supporting task, that qualitative richness, to help the client understand what each of those categories meant in a very rich qualitative way. So let me back it up right here. I know that there are some tools here beyond Excel, which is what we use for that analysis, that can help you do coding in a much more efficient way.
Yeah, there is some cool stuff here. I mean, nowadays, it's easy to have video transcripts that are associated right next to the video itself with highlighted text as it goes through. Makes it real easy to grab quotes. If everyone remembers, a year or two ago, even, we were all like, listening and writing it down and going back and writing it down. This way, they're right there and you can just grab, copy, and paste. Exporting, the world of Excel has changed dramatically. I remember several years ago, there was no way to export pictures, collages, perceptual maps, etc. Now we can do that. So pictures can be embedded in Excel exports, and they can be printed out. As you see this little visual here, they can come out formatted, top row frozen, all that good stuff. So they're very readable, and they've got all the images and everything that you need in them. The only thing on the video, video can't export directly, but it can export a link to open it up in another window. So that's pretty simple. There's online tools for flagging and tagging and, making notes and folderizing and whatnot. So there's a lot of ways, within and outside of the platform to work, to work with the data. Key thing too is, a lot of us are, very experienced in Excel. And if we're comfortable there, that is, probably the go-to resource for really breaking down the data. But again, online tools are there as well.
My technique is just to export to Excel, as you can see in that example on the slide, and then create a column next to the column of text that I want to code. And I just, I'll start coding, and I might, depending on how many fields of data I have, sometimes I'll do a sampling. I'll just look at a stratified sample of maybe 100 entries. If, sometimes if you have a diary activity, you could end up with, 2,000 lines of text in an Excel spreadsheet. It's perfectly fine to do a stratified sample of that and look at every nth case and begin to build your codes from that, and then fill that out to the rest of the data and begin your sorting in your analysis that way. So it's definitely an efficient way to go about it, rather than again reading sort of line by line and hoping something emerges. So let me just wrap up real quickly here, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions. So again, I think it's critical with online qualitative versus face-to-face qual that you start with the end in mind. You've got to have some structure and some forethought in terms of what you're going to do analytically. That is just different than in the face-to-face qualitative world in my mind. And how you do that is by thinking about where's the variance going to come from on the front end? How do I create comparisons that are going to be meaningful that will lead to insights on the back end? You want to develop those keyhole tasks. Think to yourself when you're designing your study, where am I going to go first? When the data all come in, what is the first place, the first measure or task I'm going to go to help me get into this analysis? And design that measure to be efficient and meaningful and simple so you can start that analysis in the most efficient way. And then what are my supporting tasks? What are the tasks that once I have that keyhole unlocking the study that are going to bring the richness and the life to the data that's going to make it truly a qualitative exploration. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that are out there.
Hey, Jim, do you want to just page through to the slide with our contact info if anyone wants that, and then we can go, yeah, there you go. Perfect. Okay, Jim, I've got some questions here. I'll answer a couple of these, and then we'll kind of tag team it.
Yeah, sure.
If anyone has any questions, fire them up. We've got a few to go through. I think we have plenty of time. We can go over it a little bit if we need to. First question from Janine, thank you. It says, do you prorate incentives for partial engagement? Usually no. My best practice approach to that is no. It's kind of an all or nothing thing. I do have a few clients who occasionally will give the opportunity for people, particularly if they come from quant studies and they're kind of popping in to do a qual activity, they'll let them do a few select ones and kind of pay them on a prorated basis. But I'm an all or nothing guy, and I believe in that. Jim, any thoughts on that? You probably the same school of thought on that, I would think.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, the only thing is if you're monitoring people's participation rates during the study. I mean, we will do a lot to encourage people and egg people on. And, as Ray said earlier, the more personal connection you can make with respondents, the more likely it is that they are going to complete and feel a sense of obligation. So, reaching out to those laggards in a way that's personal and gives them the benefit of the doubt and helps them along. Yeah, it helps a ton to get those completion rates up.
Absolutely. Let's see here. So Kathy has a question here, and it's, I love to do activities. It says, how far have we pushed it in the B2B audience? Great question. A lot of times we don't do things like, hey, take us on a tour with the video thing with the B2B crowd, but you can do collage. And you can do perceptual maps and things like that, even storytelling where you rephrase it or reshape it into letter to the boss or letter to my supplier. So you can play with these projective creative things and throw those things at the B2B crowd. On collage, though, I just wouldn't have them go find their own images on the web, that kind of thing. You want to simplify and keep it, pretty much direct and straightforward, but you can weave in these different projective techniques and really bring your study to life on the B2B side of things too. Okay.
Yeah, and I've got to say that this applies not only to qual, but also or to face-to-face, to online qual, but also to face-to-face. I mean, I think it's a real mistake to think that just because you're doing B2B that people stop being human. You're still talking to human beings, and the same thing that would appeal to somebody and make a study interesting and fun to them. It doesn't really matter whether they're wearing their consumer hat or their business hat. I mean, we did a year-long diary study with HR directors and managers on the insurance selection process. And we had them doing all kinds of projective stuff. And the only way we could keep them engaged was to make it interesting, make it feel like social media.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, next question was a good one. This one I'm going to throw up to you, Jim. Ever use, and this is from Randy, and thank you for your questions here, Randy, and for showing up. Ever use or know of qualities who use AI as a helping tool in analysis of unstructured text from online qual? And essentially that would, be text analytics. Jim?
I am. I'm one of them. I've tried text analytics with varying degrees of success. And my take on it is you have to, again, approach it with the right mindset. Text analytics, I think, can be a really good data wrangling tool. It's not great for text, for analysis. The thought that you can somehow push a button and insights will emerge from unstructured data just isn't going to happen. So the way that I've used something like sentiment analysis is to quickly identify stories, for instance, that have a lot of emotional content. So if I've got 80 stories that people have written and they're each 500 words long, I may use text analytics. I've used Describe, for instance, to quickly flag the 10 or 20 stories that have the most positive and negative emotional content. But then I still have to go in and read them and put eyeballs on them and do my analysis. So I think it can be good for wrangling, but don't expect it to do more than that at this stage.
The next question or comment here is, prospects often want to see examples of content, process, outcomes, et cetera, at proposal time. That's a question from Randy as well. My thoughts on that, I get that all the time. Hey, can you show me the output, meaning the report? That's where it gets kind of tricky, because usually that stuff is obviously confidential data. It's a little bit difficult to kind of say, hey, here's a report I did. Jim, do you want to reflect on that at all?
I mean, what we will share is the analysis plan. I mean, at that stage, if you're far enough along and you can envision at the proposal stage or when you're writing your guide what the analysis is going to look like, I'm fine with saying, and here's how we plan to analyze the data on the back end, or one of the ways that we're going to do it. But yeah, we always kind of stop short at sharing previous studies because that belongs to another client. But certainly trying to bring to life what the analytical plan might be, I think always helps. And it certainly helps the client understand where this is headed. And also I think it helps the sale a little bit because you sound like you know what you're doing.
All right, next question from Michael. He says, do you ever find it hard to avoid reading, highlighting, et cetera? I often suffer from a fear of missing out if I have the time and end up doing a lot of reading. Okay, I think the point is, do you have to read all the data? Can you kind of take any shortcuts? My personal opinion is I think it's same with video. It's like watch all the video, do all the reading. You'll start to see themes emerge, and then you can kind of categorize things, and that'll help you shape your analysis. And Jim, I'll let you comment a little bit more as to how you might take that into a deeper, sort of analytic zone.
Yeah. I think, the more you can immerse yourself, the better. My fear, though, is usually the opposite, that if I don't have a structured way to approach the data, I'm afraid that I'm going to miss something. I have a very hard time simply reading transcripts in order and feeling like I'm finding insights that I can support with any kind of rigor. Even if I've read everything, it's too interpretive for me. I really, even if I do that, I really have to also go through the process of setting up variance, setting up some sort of comparative context, because for me, that is where the real insights emerge. So I'm more comforted when I have some structure to it versus reading everything. The other thing that providing structure does is it allows you to involve a team. If you have other folks that you're engaged with, and you can parcel out the assignments and say, okay, you do this analysis, I'm going to do this analysis, and you have an analysis plan, then you can cover all the bases and not have to do it all yourself.
Okay, let's see. Jacqueline has a pretty good question here, Jim. In general, when it comes to reporting, do you normally cover just the major themes in the key areas of interest, or do you ever mention feedback themes from participants that's more outlying? Sometimes it can be challenging to create the most accurate summary without making things seem muddied.
Yeah, I fall back again, whether it's online qual or anything else. I fall back to kind of journalistic reporting. I started my career as a journalist, and I still do. And so I build the story around, my lead, my headline, and the flow of the narrative is around the new information that the client didn't already know that is related to the study objectives. So what is the most relevant new information? And that to me is really what you're looking for. If you discover some extraneous, interesting things that are unrelated to the study objectives, I think it's fine to report. But if your first slide, first paragraph, core of your analysis is not about what the client doesn't already know that's related to the study objectives, you're going to lose them. So that to me is always the emphasis. Those two criteria, news and relevance.
All right. Finally, a couple people have asked about a copy of the PowerPoint. If you guys want to send me an email, I'll send you a copy of the PowerPoint. That might be the easiest way to do that. And let's see, there was another question here. What are the key differences from Ann? What are the key differences for this between mobile and desk laptop-based respondents? Jim, do you want to comment on that? I mean, the activities obviously oftentimes are different because you won't do everything you do on a laptop, desktop than you would on a mobile.
Yeah.
But how do you tend to break down or analyze your mobile data?
I mean, I think, Ray, you talk about this, and I've stolen a lot of your guidance on this. It's not a difference in respondents as much as a difference in what you're asking them to do. And you just have to understand that when somebody is engaging with your platform through a mobile device, you just got to keep it simple. And so you're tailoring the tasks that they're doing through mobile to that medium. They're not going to be doing lengthy storytelling activities. They're not going to be building a collage. Save those activities for the computer-based activities. But what mobile is great for is uploading selfie videos, taking pictures in a store environment with a little text, doing a quick closed-ended survey. I mean, those are the things I think mobile's really equipped for. Getting those quick in-the-moment insights, and then save the longer, more thoughtful tasks for the computer.
Fantastic. All right. Lots of thank yous here, and you guys are all totally welcome. We really, really appreciate you guys joining us. Again, reach out, connect with us on LinkedIn. We'll keep you in the loop of content that we produce. Jim and I have both, produced quite a bit of video and written content, about our thoughts on, both on and offline research, the design of studies, and the analysis of studies. So, if you're connected to us, you guys will be on our list, and you'll get our frequent blasts. Okay.
Thank you all.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great day, and enjoy the weekend coming up. Bye-bye.